sketch the graph of y equals 3 secant of 2x, just remember that secant of x is the inverse of 1 over, or I'm sorry, is the inverse of cosine of x. So we're going to go ahead and first sketch the graph of y equals 3 cosine of 2x. If you recall, this is going to be my amplitude, the absolute value of that, which is 3. To determine the period, take the number in front of x, divide it, 2 pi divided by that number, which is going to be pi. Same thing, we want to divide the period into 4 equal markers, and just leave it as a reduced fraction. So let's go ahead and start sketching this. Create our markers. Remember that the key points for cosine of x, if we recall the parent function, it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Markers 1, 2, 3, and then finally 4. So let's go ahead and sketch this one. Again, our markers this time we're counting by pi over 4 units. So pi over 4, 2 pi over 4, 3 pi over 4, finally 4 pi over 4. We can reduce those fractions later. The amplitude being 3, let's go ahead and apply our vertical scale. Let's start applying our key points. Key points, if you notice, the first key point in the parent function is a maximum. Because of the amplitude, we're going to go ahead and sketch it at 3, back down to 0. Next key point over here, the third key point, is going to be the minimum. So go ahead and down to -3, back up to 0, finally back up to 3. Let's go ahead and sketch this. Now we want to go ahead and remember to sketch this with a dashed line because this is not our actual graph. Now what we want to do is, in this particular case, we may want to include a little bit more to the sketch than just one period. Just recall how you're counting your markers is by pi over 4, so be careful in selecting or determining the values for these markers. If you just continue the pattern, you can go ahead and determine that from there. Next thing you want to note is that because secant is the inverse of cosine, cosine being on the bottom, anything that is 0 for the graph is going to be undefined for our secant function, so this will determine our vertical asymptotes where this function is 0. So just sketch these vertical asymptotes. Remember that everything here should be dashed. We have not yet started our sketch for the secant graph. Once you determine this, what you want to notice is that your minimum and your maximum will go ahead and guide the secant graph. Remember that in an asymptote, you do not want to cross that asymptote. You do want to approach it. And there you have the secant graph.